Welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello and Evan GInzburg. Evan GInzburg, please introduce our special guest today.
There we go. I'm joined by Eric Adamz, who I've known since he was a teenager and from the New York area originally. And Eric was trained by the great, and I mean great, Johnny Rodz. So Eric, let's start with this. Let's go all the way back. Were you a wrestling fan as a kid?
Oh, I was a tremendous wrestling fan as a kid. Buddy, Evan, thank you guys for having me on today, by the way. I really appreciate it. I love the show you guys do. You have some great interviews. Everybody should take a chance to go in the archives and listen to the show. It's awesome. It's one of the best shows you can listen to as far as wrestling interviews go. Right. I can remember one of my first memories of wrestling was when I was a real little kid. I got really sick and I was bedridden for about 2 weeks. Superstars coming on Saturday morning, and I'm seeing the Honky Tonk Man, and then I'm seeing Rick Rude, and then I'm seeing these vignettes with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat where he's fighting off ninjas, and I just remember my eyes getting as big as silver dollars just seeing all this. It was the craziest thing I ever saw in my life because it was real to life, but there were these bigger than life characters, and I believed everything I saw. I was a great wrestling fan growing up. And once I saw that, I really started to like wrestling. But after I saw WrestleMania 5, Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage, and Hulk Hogan won the belt, that's when I became really hooked. And that's when I started tormenting my mom. We had a video store right across the street. They used to have the best of the WWF series, volumes 1 through whatever. Best of Hulkamania, steel cage matches and everything. And I used to get all those Coliseum home videos.
Yeah.
And then I, one morning while I was waiting for WWF programming, I stumbled upon NWA on Channel 11, the old Chicago show that used to air on WGN. We didn't get WGN in New York. So all their programming was on Channel 11. And that's when I just was like, okay, this is it. And I haven't stopped watching since.
So how did you get involved in independent wrestling?
Well, I'll tell you, it all started when I went to my first independent card. I was 13 years old. And, when I was there, I wound up getting, I was either 12 or 13. I can't remember now. And I wound up getting a program. And in the program, they had numbers for New York wrestling hotlines that didn't cost no money. It was just these 212 numbers. Evan was a guest always on a guy named Dominic Valentes.
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah, Dominic's going to stay around for forever. He's immortal.
Yeah.
And there was another guy named Matt Al and the Staten Island Stud, and these were all these characters that had these, like it was a voicemail, but you could have like an up to, I think it was like a 5 to 10 minute message, and they would give the wrestling news and the wrestling scoops. And through that, I actually found Evan GInzburg, and Evan, I then found his phone number in the phone book. Yeah, they were phone books back then, kids.
Yeah.
And I actually called Evan GInzburg and bugged him to find out about wrestling schools and to get his newsletter, Wrestling Then and Now, because I loved always the history of pro wrestling. And so that's how I wound up finding out about a guy named the Romanian Warrior who was running a wrestling school in Astoria. He was in and out. And then after him, while I was there, I met a guy named Gorilla Dizu. He just recently actually passed away unfortunately, from what we have going on right now with the coronavirus.
Wow.
And between him and Evan and everybody always talking about Johnny Rodz, and Jason Knight talking about how he trained at Johnny Rodz's. When I was 14, I went to Johnny. I lied and said I was 16. And I started working, delivering pizzas on Wall Street during the day and paid for wrestling school, and I started training at Johnny Rodz's.
Wow. And what do you think of the fans who don't quite grasp how great Johnny Rodz is? I mean, this guy was as consistent as anybody, and I think they judge him on his win-loss record, which doesn't make sense to me.
You know, I love that, actually. And I'll tell you why I love it. You've seen the Da Vinci Code, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it all starts with the dollar bill and the pyramids and the symbols in it and everything like that. I like to see when people say that and they're like, well, why is Johnny Rodz in the Hall of Fame? And then they start exploring and they see these videos online where Ted DiBiase and J.J. Dillon and Roddy Piper and Bubba Ray Dudley and Tommy Dreamer and Taz and all these guys start talking about Johnny Rodz. And so then you stop worrying about the win-loss record and you start finding out about the, what's the word I'm looking for here? The legend of Johnny Rodz. You know, because for people who don't know, Johnny Rodz was, because I'll never forget this. This was the first time I ever saw a picture of Vince McMahon Sr. was in Johnny Rodz's office. And it was autographed by Vince Sr. He still has it in his office to this day. It says, "To my top gun, Johnny Rodz." And I never knew what that meant. And Arnold Scullin used to come by every so often because him and Johnny were great friends. And Arnie always used to look at Johnny and call him the kid, which is the funniest thing. Johnny's like 60 at the time. And Johnny was not 60. He was 25 at the time when I was training, we'll say. And, you know, so I finally got Arnold once. I was like, "Mr. Scullin, on one of these autographs, Vince Sr. says to my top gun." And then that's when he explained it to me. And then I just became an even more passionate fan of pro wrestling because now I was learning not only these insider terms that aren't out in the open, but I was also learning about the inner workings of the business and how, you know, this business was based around protecting the business. So you had these gatekeepers in every sense of the word, from the locker room to in the ring. And Johnny was a gatekeeper. He was Vince Sr.'s favorite top gun. He tried everybody. And if you didn't have the right attitude, Johnny would handle you. He was a second Dan in judo. He trained with Carl Gotch in shooting.
Wow.
And he was just one of those guys that you could always know that he was coming for it.
I'll tell you off the top of my head the 3 greatest Johnny Rodz matches I saw out of hundreds. I saw him wrestle Billy Robinson at the Garden. It was like a clinic. Like a clinic. And
I wish I could get that one. I've never got to see that match.
I saw Johnny Rodz wrestle Fujinami at the Nassau Coliseum for the junior heavyweight belt. And it blew everything else on the show away, okay? And down at Gleason's, I saw Johnny Rodz and Black Gordon. That was amazing. That was
when
amazing.
Johnny started his school, he used to do shows, and he would bring in a lot of talent that would be in the area at the time. So guys like Black Gorman and Mr. Pogo and Onita and a lot of talent from, I think even Mil Mascaras came in and did one of the Gleason shows for Johnny. Yeah.
Wow.
Johnny had a lot of talent that came through. And interesting fact about Johnny, I don't know if this is public, because I actually met Gypsy Joe's son-in-law. And so I was like, you know, we're connected. And he's like, how? And I said, because back in the 70s, because remember, Johnny was wrestling with the WWE since 68. Excuse me. Johnny Rodz and Gypsy Joe used to work all the outlaw shows in New York City, too, under masks. They were a tag team called Red Devil, which was Gypsy Joe, and Jineta de la Cruz, the Horseman of the Cross, which was Johnny Rodz's character. And then that made me go down a whole nother wormhole of just the outlaw shows that used to happen in New York City.
Yeah.
You know, because when you think of outlaw shows, you hear the stories of like the Papos in Kentucky, or you hear the shows of like in Knoxville when there was the whole war when Bob Roop and all them made the Plan B video, and we're trying to make sure that Barnett didn't buy the territory and all these other things. And I really became a big fan of all that.
Buddy?
Oh,
hey,
yeah,
guys, I'm so sorry. Hold on 1 second, guys. I'm so sorry.
We have a video interruption for the moment. Well, due to technical difficulties, well, let me pause the, can I pause this?
Why don't we just continue, meanwhile?
Yeah, we'll just continue for a moment while he rejoins us here. But he makes an interesting point.
Hey guys,
about, there we are.
I'm so
okay.
sorry. So
It's
sorry.
okay.
I'm still working, so I got these guys calling in. I run the security detail for a medical clinic in downtown Atlanta, so
Oh,
Boom.
When there's an issue, I got to answer immediately.
oh yeah, no problem.
Well,
This is
yeah, no,
live,
we
total
understand that.
improv.
Yeah.
But in fact, tell us how you moved from New York to Atlanta. And
Well, actually, Atlanta's my most recent stop. I've done this kind of self-imposed journeyman travel. From New York, I went to Knoxville, Tennessee. Because I wanted to learn all I could, and at the time, Knoxville was a good hub to get to Charlotte, to get to Atlanta, to get to Louisville, Kentucky, to get to Nashville, to get to Memphis, even. And at the time, there was still studio wrestling in Memphis. OVW was going great. There was a lot of shows in the Georgia area, a lot of shows in the Carolinas and South Carolinas area, and they all had uniquely different styles. And Louisville, you had more of that Memphis style of wrestling, which is based around storytelling and heat. But Louisville was more technically sound. Louisville, Dayton, Ohio, you had more technical wrestling and fans appreciating really good technical wrestling skills. And of course, the heat that comes with it. Knoxville and Nashville taught me the power of just one good punch and selling that so the crowd would just eat you alive, almost like a Puerto Rico feel. Charlotte, the whole North Carolina, South Carolina scene was one of those scenes where it was a lot more tag team based, where tag team is the big thing still to this day. And I mean, you look at what made them famous. The Crockett's were tag team territory originally.
Oh yeah.
And so there's a lot of tag team wrestling. A lot of the babyface always comes out on top. Then when you go to Georgia, it's such the Wild West because you're either professionally trained by some of the best trainers you can find, like a Robert Gibson, like an A.R. Fox, like a Jody Hamilton, like I said Robert Gibson already. Guys of that, ilk at the time. Ilk, not elk. Sorry.
Yeah.
But then you had a whole bunch of outlaws who didn't know what they were doing. So you learned to protect yourself, and you learn how to become a better wrestler and performer for it, because you don't know if you're going to get to have one night you're working with somebody who's really great and you get to go out there and just paint. And then there's other nights you got to go out there and you got to swing the hammer. And it helped a lot. From Knoxville, also at that time, I was wrestling a lot for a company called UWA that was based out of Knoxville that used to run the Green Acres Flea Market every Thursday night. But in that flea market, we had Dr. Tom Pritchard every week. We had Ricky Morton every week. We had Tracy Smothers every week. We had a who's who of wrestling come through there. Kofi Kingston, before he signed with Deep South, came down there. Ryback came down there. AJ Styles, Shannon Moore. We had America's Most Wanted come in. We had, when guys would get released and they were still living either in Louisville or Atlanta, the next week they'd come wrestle for us at the flea market. So we got a lot of great talent that came through those doors. And working with Dr. Tom Pritchard and Ricky Morton and Tracy Smothers on a weekly basis, I mean, you just can't, these are Jedis of the wrestling business. You can't help but learn. You know what I mean? And once that started to fold it up, that's when in 2010, I decided to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte was a quiet area at the time. There wasn't a lot going on. But then Flair and Hogan ran a show. Flair ran a show along with High Spots to debut Re-Flair. And they brought Hogan in, and they brought the Nasty Boys in, and they brought everybody in for this show. And I said, there's potential here. Another company called NWA Charlotte opened up. They put some big money into it. Unfortunately, like the wrestling business, those who have the money can't do it, and those who can do it don't have the money.
Right.
But I saw the Carolinas wrestling scene and where it was growing. And I mean, out of that scene, you have the Revival, you have Cedric Alexander, you have Big Swole, you have just a lineage of guys for a while there, especially in the past couple of years on WWE TV. Some of the best matches that everybody was talking about was coming out of these guys who were all Carolina guys.
Yeah, why do you think the NWA wasn't able to succeed, the NWA?
It wasn't the NWA's fault. It was the fact that they got this beautiful building and they put the sets in and the design and everything, and they forgot about putting in a sprinkler system.
Oh, really?
So it was a $125,000 problem.
Wow.
And they organically on their own were getting paid 600, 700, 800 people a show. And then it just took that one time, it just took that. They forgot to put in a sprinkler system in their building for the crowd. And that's what blew it all. Wow. That's the real story. And of course, the normal Southern wrestling politics get in the way. Somebody called the fire marshal and did that. But at the end of the day, you have no one to blame but yourself for not having your building up to code. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, the guy made the phone call and got rid of you, but you should have had your ducks in a row. Which, unfortunately in pro wrestling, people usually don't have their ducks in a row, and that's why we're in the situation we're in now.
And what do you feel about the situation that we're in now?
I think we're better off than we have been in. I'm going to mention there was a situation that happened, a murder-suicide situation that killed the entire wrestling business. Because I was living through it. A lot of fans stopped coming to shows for about a good, I want to say 10 years, from 2007 till about 2016, so almost 10 years. You were lucky if you were drawing 200 people on a card. Because, when this murder-suicide situation happened, it made fans go away from the wrestling business. Because, it just, nobody wants to be associated with something like that. You had a lot of the great promoters leave the business, and you lost your gatekeepers. And so when those gatekeepers left, it opened the door for just anybody to come in. When I broke into the business, when I was a kid, we only had I still had to go through everything every man did in order to get in. And if you didn't make the cut, you were gone. And you had to prove your worth. You had to prove that you were willing to take the heat and you were willing to give it back. And you had to prove that you were a good human being or you were out. And that's the thing that I think is what's hurting the business right now is it's just wide open. And there's no gatekeepers and there's no accountability. And, to see these horror stories that are coming out, especially on an independent level in the past week, that's just monstrous behavior by a bunch of people who feel like they can that they're bulletproof because they can do whatever they want because they're friends of friends or they got jobs here or there. And you can't do that. You can't. And, I really hope that this isn't one of those cases where someone goes, I hope this is a lot like the Rude Boy Riley situation. Rude Boy Riley was convicted, found guilty of child pornography, infant pornography, and nobody will have him back in the business. And just because these girls are teenagers or young female adults, I hope they don't let these men back in the business. I know I won't work with them.
Have you yourself witnessed situations like this in the indie feds that you've worked with? You don't have to name any names.
I lived through it.
I'm sorry?
I lived through it.
You did?
You got to remember, when I moved from from New York to Knoxville, Tennessee, I was just a 20-year-old good-looking kid. I'm not the guy who you see today. Offered sexual favors for spots on shows or for better pay. Offered by promoters, hey, take some pictures in your underwear and I'll give you $250.
Wow.
But I don't feel my story is important right now. I think the important story right now are these female wrestlers who have been treated incorrectly and these young teenage wrestling fans. And that's why I made the post I made on Facebook the other day. And it got shared a lot, and I wish it gets shared more. And I'd like for people to help me share the sentiment. Stop sexualizing teenage wrestling fans.
I did see that on your Facebook, and I mean, yes, I would absolutely, the ring rat phenomenon is something that is not something that
I don't see nothing wrong with ring rats, because there's a difference between ring rats and a teenage girl who just wants to meet their favorite wrestler. Okay, no matter what industry you're in, they have badge bunnies, they have lot lizards, they have groupies, they have ring rats. There are people in this business that they will consensually agree that they want to have a romantic experience with a professional wrestler. And as long as it's two consenting adults, there's no problem with that. I see no issue with ring rats whatsoever. But when you're a teenage girl and you're trying to do that, you as a man, you need to step up and go, no, that's not going to happen, sweetheart. Or even in a case of where they don't want that, you don't approach them about that. If you don't get a verbal, with teenage girls, they don't know what the hell they want. No teenage boy knows what he wants. So you just can't do that. And, like I said, it just comes down to, I don't think 16-year-old girls go out with the intent that they want to go sleep with a fucking 30-year-old, go get accosted by a 35, 40-year-old pro wrestler in some cases. They want to go to the show. They want to meet their idol, even if they have a little crush, Okay, yeah, you sign their picture. You sign their poster. You give them a hug, the one arm like this. Just like this, folks. That's all it takes. When you take a picture, arm on shoulder, side to side. If they're okay with it, and then you just let it go. But unfortunately, we're dealing with a business full of monsters, and those monsters need to be slayed. And it really sucks because there's a lot of really good people in this business who are not like that.
I'm glad
they're getting the shaft.
I'm glad you said that. Teachers, for example, there's just that line: you do not touch a student. Simple.
Yes.
Simple. Okay. Now, you have 90 or so wrestlers that have been accused, and I'm sure many are guilty, but at the same time, each case is individual, and you still have to go along with innocent until proven guilty in many cases.
Oh, absolutely. But once you're up to 17 accusations.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'll give you one of my favorite lines that I've heard all my life. If you hear for 20 years that this guy's a crackhead, you could damn well bet there's a crack pipe somewhere.
It was kind of like with Bill Cosby when you had 80 accusers, and the geniuses are going, they're all gold diggers. And I'm like, no, there's 80 women. Somebody's telling the truth.
Yeah, there's he said, she said, and then there's he said, they said.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference, But one thing that I was going to try to get in a little bit deeper, Eric, and see if you wanted to get there, because that's what I love about this show, is having a discussion where we I was going to ask you about this very topic, and you just went right into it.
Sure.
But is there something about the way that the locker room is? And we've been there. All of us have been in wrestling locker rooms. There's that kind of like high school mentality, like you're doing something that you loved kind of as an adolescent, and so you want to hold on to not growing up. And so there's this attitude like it's like high school that just never ends when you're in some locker room.
Yes, I've called professional wrestling the 13th grade for a very long time.
Yeah.
And and I mean, we all have fun in the locker room, and there's times where you can have fun and joke around and everything like that. But there's a fine line between ribs and practical jokes and sexually or verbally assaulting a woman. There's a fine line, and it's really not that hard to find that line. And I'm trying to think how I can explain this. when we used to have gatekeepers in the locker room, we had locker room leaders. The WWE still has locker room leaders. It used to be The Undertaker. Now it's somebody else. It's not my job to say who's who. But, there was always that locker room leader who it was his job to maintain that locker room and make sure that things were run right. Sort of like within baseball, there's always the coach player guy. And it's his job to make sure that locker room is cleaned up and that nothing's going on. Well, now that in this business, we don't have that veteran who can sit in a locker room and his whole job is just to make sure things are being done right. It's an issue. And I think another big issue we're having is there was a certain class of guy when I started wrestling in the late 90s. Nick Bockwinkel once did a show for Johnny. I'll never forget this. Nick Bockwinkel showed up. This is one of his last wrestling matches. He showed up in his suit. He told his dirty jokes, but there was a certain amount of class to him. And he was just a classy guy, and he was a throwback of who you wanted to be. When you go backstage at the WWE, I'm strictly talking the talent now. There's a certain bit of class that these guys carry themselves with. And, they'll be joking around, they'll be having fun and jumping around, but it's always respectful. On an independent level, especially on these smaller shows, it's just these promoters who want to pay a guy $25, so they won't book me. Guys, I'm so sorry. Hold on one second. I apologize.
It's all right. But you're making a great point, so to keep going. Okay.
So buddy, when we have these little breaks, do a couple of quick plugs. Everybody check out 350 Days and Wrestling Then and Now on Amazon Prime, folks. Bret Hart, Billy Graham in 350 Days, and Nikolai Volkov, Killer Kowalski, Homicide, Don Dr. Death Arnold in Wrestling Then and Now. Amazon Prime, both films are free. 350 Days, also on Tubi and Roku, so it's not hard to find. 350 Days, themovie.com. And anything you want to plug, buddy, while we're waiting?
Yeah, I'll be doing the Indie Handshake podcast. If you don't get enough of me right now, you'll get an hour and 45 minutes worth of Buddy Sotello and everything that made Buddy Sotello what he is today. And it's with Paul Pontus, who interviews me directly for the Indie Handshake podcast. So you can find it at indiehandshake.podcast.com, and it's also on Apple Podcasts. You can just look for it, Indie Handshake, or you can find it on YouTube. Just go type in Indie Handshake on one of those forums, and you can find me. And certainly, hopefully, you check that out, because it's always good to talk. So.
And check out the Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast Facebook page, and like, share, spread the word. We have all our episodes posted there, as well as on YouTube. And just a quick disclaimer, the opinions, the comments of all of our guests not necessarily shared or endorsed by yours truly or Buddy Sotello. Correct, Buddy?
Yeah, but I pretty much
a lawyer.
I pretty much agree with him. In fact, I thought what he was saying was really poignant. I really want to get deeper in depth on this issue because it's really central to what's bothering people about wrestling.
No, that's a general comment for all of our show. We used to have a disclaimer on my old Legends Radio show each and every episode. It's just a little legal thing.
Well, you know what though? I think for the most. Oh, okay. Here we are. Hold on. Let me see if I can bring him in. Oh, he's still.
Okay, are you guys there?
Yeah, we're back. We were able to.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We plowed ahead. Don't worry.
Okay, so you guys are still going through. I don't have to start over with the point.
Oh no! That's too much editing. I'm way too lazy to do something like that.
Well, my apologies.
No, but what you're saying is really poignant. So I want you to continue with your.
Well, yeah. It's the problem is there's no gatekeepers, and so anyone who gets over feels like they can just say and do whatever they want. And there are people that they hurt other people in this business because they know they can get away with it and they can say and do whatever they want. And it sucks. It really does. And that's become the big issue is these promoters, like I said, they'll pay to bring me in maybe 5 or 6 times a year, but they run weekly. So they're going to pay the $25 guy to be on their show every week. And that $25 guy, he might not have the best intentions in the world. And he might be one of these people who's a problem, who's problematic. And, you know, that's when it stopped being a business, when people realized they could just get away with cheap talent and cheap labor. And, you know, you get what you pay for.
But I wanted to go even deeper than that, not to,
Sure.
to keep digging in this, but is there something about the fact that how the business works, that we're dealing with fame, we're dealing with things that, as you pointed out, are larger than life, that you know, the audience and how much it adores the performers, and that gives a certain sense of power to those that are performers, I think. And that's like if you've ever been big timed by somebody, you know, somebody.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that really thinks that what they're doing in wrestling makes them like special in a way.
Well,
There is that when you perform for somebody, whether you're a musician, whether you're a dancer, whether you're an actor, whether you're, you know, a wrestler, when the audience really digs what you're doing, that gives you that sense of power. You think there's just this sort of thing that like people are in this position to manipulate other folks based on that, and that power goes to their head and corrupts them in ways without any guidance.
yes, absolutely. I can see that. I'm sorry. We're about to get a storm to come through. Let me turn this light on so you guys can see me better. There we go.
Yeah. Couldn't be a nicer day in California, but I'm
Oh,
sure.
we're
has
flickering
its
back and forth.
If we lose you, we'll definitely have you on at another time.
Yeah,
but we'd
definitely.
love to get continue.
Well,
to,
I'll tell you this much. I believe that's in the person. The person's going to show you right off the bat if they're one of those people where the stardom of independent wrestling goes to their head, which to me, stardom in independent wrestling is an oxymoron. It's like jumbo shrimp. No one's getting rich. No one's getting famous. The Young Bucks did a great publicity job, but everybody forgets the reason those guys got to a point where they were selling millions of dollars of merchandise is because at the same time they were in Ring of Honor, they were on Impact Wrestling, they were in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and then Hot Topic was the one that really gave them the boost, because Hot Topic was one of the vendors for the WWE that came down for WrestleMania weekend. They saw these Bullet Club shirts. They thought they looked amazing. And they said, how can we start selling these Bullet Club shirts? And the WWE said, oh, those aren't ours. So Hot Topic continued their WWE licensing. And then they went to Pro Wrestling Tees and started licensing their merchandise. So, but none of the money they make, I feel as if it really comes from bookings. I think it's just like music where your money comes from your merchandise sales. And they were smart businessmen and they promoted themselves correctly for their audience. And they got it. And, but as far as on an independent level, you know, I'm talking second tier and below independent wrestling. To me, first tier independent wrestling, you're talking about Impact Wrestling. You're talking about Ring of Honor. You're talking about, well, no, I'd put Ring of Honor higher. So we'll say, you know, second tier are all those companies. And then you have the third tier independent, which is where the real issues lay, because they just let anyone and everyone wrestle. There were so many shows that you'll find where there were people who are sexual predators that are on, you know, sexual predator lists across the United States that they're allowed to perform on these shows. They're allowed to run wrestling shows. And people turn a blind eye because it's not that they have the fame, it's that they're chasing the fame. So if they think this promoter is going to pay them this much money to wrestle for them, and they're going to get a push, no matter if it doesn't do anything to help their career. They're going to run to go to that guy, and they're going to stay silent about everything else going on in the business. That's where you have the problem, is silence. Personal opinion.
There you go. So, Eric, I must ask this. You were trained by the best. You worked with the best. You worked around the world. What are the politics as far as, how come we're not seeing you on WWE or whatnot?
That's my fault. I spent a lot of years not purposely chasing this. I didn't work out right. I was a great worker. Well, not a great worker. People have said I'm a great worker, but I wasn't cosmetically appealing in an era when that's all they cared about. In the last regime of the WWE, when they had, 2 regimes ago now for talent relations, that guy only wanted people 6'1" with abs. So I said, okay, I'm never going to go to WWE, because he literally stated one time to me, if you're not 6'1", 6'2" with abs, I have no use for you.
Wow.
And at 6 foot tall and built like how I am, no matter how hard I try, I'm never going to have abs. But
isn't that an injustice? I mean, I come from an era where Ray Stevens, Dusty Rhodes, Pat Patterson, and whatnot.
Greg Valentine.
These guys had beer bellies. These were among the greatest wrestlers of all time.
And you're right.
Man isn't known for his abs.
Ollie Race didn't have
right.
a six-pack of abs.
And you're absolutely right. And what's happened to the wrestling business since it's changed?
It's gotten a lot worse. Yeah.
You have to look at it like this. If you look at when WCW and WWF were going to war on the Monday Night Wars, you had more than 10 million people watching wrestling in the United States alone every Monday night. Viewership has sunk so low that now, what channel is it that shows AEW? TNT or TBS? They're owned by the same people.
TNT.
Okay. The same channel that canceled WCW Monday Night Nitro because they were only pulling 4s in the ratings.
I think they're one.
Just signed a 3-year deal with AEW, a brand new deal, and they're barely clearing 1 million homes.
Yeah, it's like 1.5 or something like that. Yeah. Well, there's a lot more, obviously, for people to pay attention to, but people also aren't as thrilled with the, empty arena show.
And that's fine, but I'm saying before that happened, they were barely clearing 1 million. When I was a kid in high school, so we're talking late 90s, you would see WWF shirts. You'd see you see Stone Cold 316 shirts. You'd see NWO shirts. You'd see ECW shirts everywhere you went.
Oh yeah. Now you
at
just
least
see
once a day.
Club.
Yeah. Now you don't. You're lucky if you see one once a day. I'm talking about in regular everyday life.
Exactly.
Pro wrestling was a part of the fabric of life at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
if you look at something.
Not.
Yeah, and if you look at something like NXT now, NXT's doing great. They're still not doing the ratings Raw and SmackDown are doing, but you see they have a collection of different athletes of different sizes, different weights, different heights, different ethnicities, and you're seeing that the people enjoy this product. So when I started seeing that about 2 years ago, I decided I was going to give this another try. And so I've taken it more seriously here in Atlanta since I moved here a year ago. I've also been working with Robert Gibson a lot. Robert Gibson, I help out sometimes at his school, pretty much by helping out. He tells me what to show them, and I show them. But, and sometimes I'll come up with some ideas for them, and sometimes I learn from them just watching how they're doing things. And this past year was really past 2 years have been a big push for me. And unfortunately, now we're under quarantine, so I'm in a holding pattern.
Right. See, I've seen the best of the best for almost 50 years, and I think of Eric Adamz as probably the best unsigned talent out there.
Thank you, Evan.
No, I mean that sincerely. I'm not just
Thank you
saying
so
it because
much.
you're on the show. And I've seen you wrestle live many times. And
he never once asked for a refund, folks. He was so sweet.
That's right.
He saw me my first 2-3 years in this business, and he never once demanded a refund after he had to watch those stinkers.
Yeah. So what do you consider some of your highlights, career highlights?
Oof. I got to start with my first official pro match. I didn't do much in it, but still I was in the ring with one of my idols, Steve Dr. Death Williams, for Major League Wrestling at the Manhattan Center. Me and Tim Arson versus a man who would become James Bronson on NXT and Steve Dr. Death Williams. I would say going to Puerto Rico and getting so much heel heat that they were spitting on me.
Yeah.
When were you in Puerto Rico, by the way? I'm just curious.
Excuse me?
When were you in Puerto Rico?
This was World Wrestling Council. This is when Timmy was down there. I went down there a couple times. So I want to say this is like 06, 07.
So you may have worked with my friend Mark Smith.
Mark Smith.
Bison Smith.
Mark the Bison. Mark
Bison. Yeah. I was down there when Bison was there.
Yeah.
I was with Bison. One of my trips down, Bison was there, and he told me he was getting ready to go to ROH. And then he went to ROH, and then like 3 weeks later, I saw him debut on ROH. So he was finished up. But God bless him. You know, God rest his soul. Such a great
Mark
great
and I
talent.
entered the business together. I mean, we that's how I got started, was managing Mark.
Really?
Mark is Super Destroyer 2000 back in All Pro Wrestling.
Yeah. So you're in California.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah. So, oh God, what was that promoter's name that ran All Pro Wrestling?
Roland Alexander.
Is he still around?
No, he died years ago.
Really? I heard he was such a character, man.
It's for another show, but that's how I got started. I was the attorney for All Pro Wrestling and worked with Roland Alexander, and he made me a professional wrestling manager for guys like Vinny Massaro and Mark Smith and Boom Boom Kamini and the whole West Coast stuff.
You know, there was a couple of guys like Boom Boom Kamini and Mike Modest, and, Crash Holly, and all those guys I used to watch out of All Pro Wrestling. That, you know, I was just Mike Modest. What a tragedy that is, because he was such a talent.
No, Mike's fine. Mike.
Well, no,
Mike,
I'm saying the fact he never got his run on a mainstream wrestling product is a tragedy.
Oh, I was gonna say he's the West Coast version of you. No, really. When Evan was just saying those things about you, I was saying, God, he reminds me of Mike Modest.
Well,
Seriously.
Mike Modest was absolutely doing this longer than me, and if I could be half the talented performer that Mike Modest is in my career, I could absolutely call this a successful career.
He was an amazing guy in the ring, and he's just too old to do anything right now, but he gave it his all. He
really did. He was a tremendous
one-off matches in WCW and the WWF. He had,
and of course, he had a great run in Japan. You know, and I really respect Mike Modest. I always thought he was a very talented wrestler. Oh, God, what was the guy that Mike Modest used to team with?
Donovan Morgan.
Donovan Morgan was another one I thoroughly was entertained by watching. And Vic Grimes was always entertaining to watch and terrifying because of just how athletic he was for a big guy. But yeah, there was a lot of guys out there. I remember seeing like American Dragon was down there for a while.
That was Brian Danielson, who turned into Daniel Bryant. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of folks. I'm thrilled to hear that you work with Mark Smith, because just anyone that knew him knew what a really genuine guy he was. And I know Evan doesn't want me going on and on about Mark Smith, but he's a guy that when the Thanksgiving time rolls around, I think about him. It's almost. I think this year will be 8 years that he died.
Yeah, and he would have been the perfect guy to be a gatekeeper at some of these promotions, because he was a very respectful human being. He was respected. He was respectful, but he didn't put up with no bullshit. I'll tell you that much right now. He did not put up with no bullshit, especially when he moved out to St. Louis. for a while there when he was doing the Harley camps and everything. We would see him on indie shows, and I watched him. This one independent show, I'm not even going to mention, they're not even around no more. But I saw where this one guy got really out of hand one time with his yelling at a woman, this promoter, for something that the woman couldn't even help. And I watched Bison put that promoter in his place.
He was truly someone that stood up for
Yes.
like people who were being bullied, and he's a remarkable guy. And I miss him probably
But a
every
hell of
day
a worker.
some
Hell
little
of a
way.
worker.
Yeah.
His stuff in Noah, especially those early years of Noah when he was one of the few Gaijins along with Vader and Too Cold Scorpio coming in. Great work out of that guy. I really was a fan of his.
I saw him live. I saw him live for Ring of Honor in New York. He was tremendous.
Yeah.
Tremendous.
A lot of people
He really
also
was.
don't know he was part of the 6-man tag team that was there when Misawa died.
Yeah.
He was on the other side of the tag team.
Yeah, he was with Go Shiozaki and I forgot who the other guy was in the match.
Eerie foreshadowing. It was eerie
Yeah.
foreshadowing.
I
I don't know what happened in Puerto Rico, by the way. I've never gotten a full story about that.
Of why he left?
What? Well, I mean, they said he had a heart attack in Puerto Rico, but I've never gotten any other details other than that. So
I mean, he was a big guy and he ran hard and he worked hard in the ring, and years of getting dropped on your head and years of everything else that goes on, it catches up to you.
but it wasn't drugs, man. It wasn't drugs.
Not at all.
I'll tell you that.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying the hard living of 2 weeks you do a 2-week tour of Noah, and then you're on a plane to San Juan, and then you're on another plane to Ring of Honor in Philadelphia, and then you're going back to San Juan, and then going straight to Japan with no break. That all catches up to you real quick. And, his love of the business, and especially for how big of a guy he was, he didn't complain about nothing, and all his hard work, I think that's what all caught up with him. Just how hard he went at this business, because he really was like a bison. He just hurtled through and just went. And it was really a shame when he passed away. I think he'd be one of the biggest stars on WWE TV right now. I could see him and Roman Reigns main eventing a WrestleMania. Personal opinion.
Wow. So I have nothing more to add other than it's a tremendous tragedy that he's gone. So I'll try to lighten the mood, but it's interesting that we do know all these other wrestlers in common. That's
yeah,
really
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, it's really great.
So where do you think things are going to go with the COVID-19 right now and the virus problems that we have? Is live wrestling done? Is big crowds ever going to come back? I mean, what about for indie shows?
I'll tell you this right now. Who can predict really the future? I have a friend of mine. He's a doctor here in the Atlanta area. And I asked him 2 weeks ago, I said, so are we in the clear? And he said, hell no. No, we're not done. We're not in the clear at all. We'll be back in stay-at-home orders within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
And you're seeing what's happening in Florida. You're seeing what's happening in Texas. And you're seeing what's happening in, what was the other state? Florida, Texas,
in my own
Arizona.
county. In my own county here, we've got higher numbers than we've ever had. So I'm with you on this.
Well, you have to remember, our state was the first one to open, and we were number 7 on the list of most cases in the country. Georgia, he opened that up way too soon. And now we're seeing the issues that are coming up, and so I don't know. I'd love for wrestling to come back. I'm scheduled to make my return to the ring Saturday, August the 8th for All Pro Championship Wrestling in Douglasville, Georgia. I would really love for that show to happen, but is it worth risking even one child's life or one senior citizen's life to run a show? That's the real question. APCW is doing everything they can to accommodate to the social distancing rules, but at the end of the day, I have to question that. And it's hard for me to question that because I could lose bookings just saying this right now. You know, because there are people who, you know, they just want to run. They want to make money. They want to go. They want to go. They want to go. And I would love to have wrestling come back too. But is it really safe yet? That's the real question. Is it safe? I mean,
I'm asking you how you feel. I'm asking you directly.
And I'm trying to come up with an answer for you. That's why I'm asking questions too. It's a real touchy subject for me because, you know, I take care of a 78-year-old, you know, senior citizen with disabilities, and some of those include breathing issues. And so I don't leave the house all that much right now because if I do, I put them at risk. So I feel as if you're single, if you're young, if you're athletic, and you can take the risk, by all means, take the risk. But in a situation like mine, I'm having to find, even with my regular day-to-day job, I'm having to find alternative measures to make sure that, you know, my parent, who I take care of, is going to be safe if I go to work and if I go to do shows. I don't think we're in the clear. I think the biggest issue we're having is people not wearing face masks and these towns and counties opening up too quickly. I feel they didn't put plans in place. They were more worried. I'll give you an example here in Georgia. Even though it was a 2-week stay-at-home mandatory order, they still kept open the liquor stores because they make their money off that. But they didn't put in place online Zoom AA meetings for alcoholics who need them that are now stuck at home, or Addicts Anonymous that they need these meetings. Luckily, there were people who stepped up to the plate and they created their own AA meetings and Addict Anonymous meetings, because I have friends who have issues like that and I try and keep up with them. And I had one friend who I really had to make sure that they were okay. And I had to help them find these online meetings for their issues with their dependencies.
And suicides have doubled in Queens, New York.
Absolutely.
Including a friend of mine. And, you know, these are issues that really aren't being addressed. Being stuck in the house for months and months. I mean, yeah.
But in the same breath, that's what we're going to have to do to get through this. So we can.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you. Let's.
I mean, here's the craziest thing to me. Our governor wants everything wide open. The insane clown posse canceled the gathering of the Juggalos this year because they said it's not worth risking one fan's life.
South by Southwest. Yeah.
For the first time in my life, I can say that the insane clown posse is more responsible than the governor of a state in the United States. Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
What I'm saying is, if we're stuck at home for many more months, they need services for the people that Eric and I are talking about.
Yeah, well, you know, and they're starting to do that now. You know, like the person I take care of, they've been able to do their doctor's visits over Skype and Zoom, and that helps a lot.
Spousal abuse is up also, you know.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, there's stuff that's going to have to be addressed if we're home another 6 months.
I would hope it doesn't go that long, but like I said, I'm booked for a show August the 8th. They're trying to implement every safety precaution that has to be taken. But in the same breath, I sometimes question if I'm still making the right decision. And that might get me in some trouble, and I'm sorry if it does, but I'm not.
I think you wouldn't be human if you weren't contemplating that. And anyone that thinks that people wouldn't be thinking about that, either performing or setting up the show or anything like that, that they're putting themselves at risk, or people that they live with at risk. That's a scary concept. And you never, I mean, independent wrestling is hard enough to do by itself, even when you really want to do it, being motivated, fighting the economics of it, finding a venue, insurance, all these other things, promoting it. That's hard enough. But when you then have to put in sanitation and safety, and we've been to enough indie shows, all of us, to know, like, I don't think there's anything worse than the bathroom at at one of these indie shows.
Well, here, let's tell them the truth. Sometimes the bathroom is just a bucket in the locker room with a curtain over it for people to go urinate in.
It's a wall. It's a wall outside.
It's a wall outside. Yeah. It's a bucket. It's whatever it is. And
glamorous.
It's a car. It's a car of somebody you don't like.
Yeah. I always carry around a spray bottle of peroxide, and after every match, I spray myself down just to disinfect myself and stay clean. And I've been doing that for years now because 99% of the times I've gotten sick wrestling or I've caught the flu or something crazy was because I got in the ring with one of these people who doesn't take care of themselves. Luckily, the main reason I'm doing this show is I know everybody who's a participant in it, and I know they've been practicing social distancing. They have been wearing masks. They have been staying home. And these are people that I know that the person I'm wrestling has 3 children of their own and a wife, and he's not going to put any of them at risk. So I'm okay with doing this match with him. I'm doing everything in my power to be match 1 because I don't want to be in that Peachtree dish of a wrestling ring after everybody sweated in it. It's not like...
it's one of the few times that curtain jerking is actually something that everyone is going to be clamoring for. No one wants
I'll be honest with you, I love curtain jerking. I miss it. I miss curtain jerking. I love setting the tempo for a night. I love being able to pop a crowd, and the competitive athletic side of me wants to see who can top this. So I've always enjoyed curtain jerking.
I like first match after intermission. That was always one of my big spots.
Oh, absolutely, because that gets you. You're the heat guy. You're the guy who brings the crowd back.
Yeah, and you get a little bit more time to see how the crowd has been acting in the first, 2 or 3 matches before intermission comes in. So that was always my thing. If it can't be a main event, be first match after the intermission. But anyway, we're running up right against the hour here. It's been an absolutely fascinating hour. Why don't you have a chance to promote, the upcoming matches that you're doing and any other projects that you have working
Sure.
on?
If you follow me on Facebook or on Instagram, it's my name, Eric Adamz, EricAdamz. With this time off, I've been working a lot more in the production side of wrestling, making little comedy videos and skits and little sagas.
I saw it. I was checking it out.
Yeah, we just finished the 7-part saga to Unpickle a Pepper Bottom. It's our manager, Cornelius Pepperbottom. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. He's a student that's our manager that we're trying to get him ready and initiate him so he can become a professional wrestler. August the 8th, All-Pro Championship Wrestling at the Hairway Christian Academy. We'll be running there, hopefully barring anything coming up. And on every Tuesday night, 8:05, Beyond Bushido. It's a podcast I do with my friend James Loquist. We're looking back at the world and art of shoot wrestling from UWFI, Fujiwara Gumi. Now we're into the Pancrase stuff. Oh, yeah, we do it every Tuesday night. Our special guest host every week. I think this is the week we're going to initiate him as a fellow co-host. Renee, he's on that show too. We have a lot of fun. We talk wrestling. We talk politics. We talk current events. And we have a lot of fun doing it. Of course, there's the drinking games that go on. 2 episodes ago, James and Renee decided that they were going to, every time someone got a knee bar or any kind of leg lock in, they were going to go ahead and have a drink.
Big shot.
Yeah. And, well, I made sure to pick a really good episode for that one. So it was Takayama versus Fujiwara.
So nice. So that's a lot of those moves.
Yeah, so. And it's fun teaching people the history of MMA and where it originates from. So we've been having a lot of fun with that. Also, I do special secondary episodes called Beyond Bonfire. The first one we did was actually with Kevin Sullivan, and we showed some old Kevin Sullivan matches from his time when he was wrestling for Continental Wrestling, for Florida Wrestling, of course, some WCW stuff, and even the original WWWF stuff that he did when he was a young Irish babyface for the company in the 70s.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. We're working on a couple other guys coming in. But those are my projects. And, Evan, I love you to death. You've always been my biggest supporter. You've always been really helpful to me, and I appreciate this again. Buddy, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'd love to have you actually come on, and maybe we could do a Beyond Bonfire talking about the history of All Pro Wrestling in the California
I would
scene.
love to do that. I just did a podcast this week on APW, and I'm a good source for a lot of things. I mean, I was basically in the same training class as Sarah Del Rey.
Yeah.
And Tom Castor.
Death Ray. Yeah.
Yeah, and Sarah used to give me low blows and miss and hit me right in the Johnson and heel me over for about half an hour.
And now she's, I believe she's the head trainer for the women over at the Performance Center. They love her very much. They respect her. And I'm just very happy for someone like her to have, she's leaving her mark in this business for years to come.
Never met a harder worker, male or female, in your entire life than Sarah Del Rey. Her and Mark Smith were very cut out of the same sort of cloth, that they were very genuine people.
And Shimmer Wrestling.
Shimmer, yes.
Yeah, when Asuka was still known as Kana, Sarah Del Rey and Kana had a clinic of a match that, to this day, whenever I speak to any of the female wrestling students, I make them watch that match. All the time.
Great stuff. We have a whole nother program we could be doing here. And
and it's crazy because I remember you now. The problem was I was always getting the bootleg of a bootleg of a bootleg of All Pro Wrestling. So, the faces were kind of mashed up and stuff. So now I know exactly what you look like.
Well, and then you add 20 years onto when I was doing that stuff. So, that changes things a little bit as well. 20 years adds a few things, plus the Zoom camera and all that. But I would love to do your show. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest. There's no question about that. I'd love to have you on again, especially after you've done some of these shows. You maybe can tell us what your experience was like and, the future for everything that you're doing in Atlanta. Any last words that you would like to have there, Evan?
Yes. Eric is wrestling's greatest unsigned talent. I mean that sincerely.
Thank you, Evan.
WWE, pick them up.
Or at least AEW. Man, you've impressed the hell out of me. And
Japan, whomever.
Yeah, I really hope for the most success for you. And,
Thank you so much.
Looking forward to have you on again on our show soon. Thank you, everyone. Good night.